Have you ever noticed that the more you talk about your problems, the heavier they seem? We live in a world that tells us to share everything, but sometimes the more you share, the more broken you feel. You post, you vent, you cry, and yet peace still hides like a stranger. What if the real reason your heart feels restless isn't because life is hard, but because you've been carrying what was never yours to carry? See, everyone runs somewhere when life gets heavy. Some run to people, some to distraction, some to self-pity. But what if I told you that the very thing draining your peace is the habit of running everywhere except to God? This message isn't about ignoring your pain, it's about redirecting it. Because true strength doesn't come from holding on tighter, it comes from surrender. Maybe this is the moment to breathe, to pause your thoughts, and finally let go. Ask yourself, where have you been taking your burdens? To people who judge, or to the one who sustains? Because what you do with your problems determines what they do with you. Comment below if you're ready to stop running and start resting in God's peace. Every person carries a backpack filled with invisible burdens, problems, worries, regrets that weigh down the soul. We try to fix things ourselves, patching broken pieces with human strength, but it only adds pressure. Some turn to friends, some to social media, hoping for validation or pity, yet none of it brings divine peace. Only when one decides to trust God fully, laying every weight before Him in prayer, does the heart begin to breathe again. He never grows tired of listening, and His judgment is never cruel. The truth is, people often treat burdens like laundry. They keep sorting through the same pile, hoping it'll somehow clean itself. But peace doesn't come from analyzing the problem. It comes from surrender. God doesn't need long explanations, He needs honesty. Psalm 55:22 says, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you." That's not just poetic comfort, it's a divine command rooted in wisdom and mercy. When we obey it, we step into the kind of rest that human comfort can't give. It's easy to talk about faith, but harder to live it when anxiety hits at 2 a.m. That's when divine peace becomes more than a verse, it becomes survival. The Spirit whispers, "Stop carrying what I've already offered to hold." In those quiet moments, surrender turns into strength, and spiritual rest begins. The more one learns to rely on God's strength, the lighter life feels. And maybe, just maybe, that's when we realize the problem was never meant to be shared with people first, but with God. Most people don't really want solutions, they want sympathy. They crave validation because silence feels like punishment. But here's the hidden danger. When you share every wound, not everyone listening is there to heal you. Some will judge, some will gossip, and others will quietly compare your pain to their own. That's why discernment is essential. Not every shoulder is safe, and not every listener carries grace. When someone complains constantly, they unknowingly give away power. They turn their problems into public property, open to the world's opinions and limited help. Human understanding is fragile. People interpret through their own brokenness. They can pity you today and criticize you tomorrow. But when prayer replaces complaint, transformation begins. God's presence becomes the refuge that no conversation can replace. There's a reason why Jesus often withdrew from crowds. He knew that some people follow pain, not purpose. When you take your burdens to people who can't carry their own, you both sink. But when you surrender them to divine wisdom, something shifts inside you. Peace replaces pity, discernment replaces dependency, and before you know it, the need to complain turns into the strength to trust. Even the kindest hearts have limits. People can love you deeply and still misunderstand your pain. That's not because they're cruel, It's because human perception is filtered through experience, emotion, and exhaustion. We can't expect divine understanding from limited minds. Someone might listen with empathy, but only God listens with perfect discernment. That's why He invites us to bring our worries to Him first, not as a last resort. When you expect people to fix what only heaven can heal, disappointment is inevitable. Friends may offer advice, but even their best intentions can miss the mark. They see the symptoms, but God sees the soul. Human wisdom stops where divine insight begins. And when one finally accepts that limitation, a beautiful shift happens. The heart stops chasing human comfort and starts craving divine companionship. Think of it this way. When you share your problem with 10 people, you'll get 10 opinions and 0 peace. But when you kneel and share it once with God, He gives you guidance, peace, and strength that no human could ever provide. His understanding has no boundaries, no bias, no fatigue. He doesn't get tired of your prayers. In fact, He waits for them, because that's where spiritual dependence begins and where transformation quietly takes root. Faith and validation can't live in the same heart for long. One looks up for divine wisdom, the other looks around for approval. Many people confuse being heard with being healed. They post their struggles hoping likes will feel like love, but human applause is faster than morning mist. God, however, listens in silence and restores in strength. He doesn't just hear your words, He interprets your heart. When someone lives for validation, peace becomes impossible. They start depending on human opinions the way a plant depends on sunlight. Except people aren't always shining. Sometimes they praise you, other times they ignore you completely. But God's presence is consistent. He never gossips about your pain, never grows weary of your prayers, and never abandons you mid-battle. His guidance is not reactive, it's redemptive.
Trusting God means trading noise for stillness. It's choosing prayer over performance, surrender over explanation. You stop asking, "Do they understand me?" and start asking, "Does this honor God?" That shift brings freedom, because when belief roots itself in God's character instead of human opinion, faith becomes unshakable. And that's exactly the posture required to obey the next divine command, to cast every burden at His feet. There's a difference between a suggestion and a command. And cast your burden on the Lord, Psalm 55:22, is not a gentle hint. It's an instruction, a lifeline for weary souls. God doesn't ask our burdens because He's curious. He commands it because He knows we can't carry them without breaking. Every time we try to hold what only He can handle, we invite exhaustion. Faith isn't pretending you're strong, it's admitting you're not, and trusting God's strength instead. When you cast your burdens on the Lord, you're not escaping responsibility, you're transferring ownership. You're saying, "God, this is too heavy for me, but not for you." That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In doing so, divine peace replaces human panic. You stop fighting storms and start walking through them with assurance. God never promised a life without trouble, but He did promise His sustaining hand through every trial. 1 Peter 5:7 says to cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. That's not poetry, it's power. When prayer becomes the first response instead of the last option, divine comfort enters the chaos. Problems may not vanish instantly, but they lose their power to control you. And in that surrender, you find the doorway to true spiritual rest. Relying on God's strength begins where self-reliance ends. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That's not just comfort, it's an invitation to exchange weakness for divine power. Depending on God isn't laziness, it's alignment. When you surrender control, you're not quitting, you're cooperating with a higher wisdom. You stop striving and start abiding, realizing that peace isn't found in doing more, but in trusting more. Some people think they must fix everything before coming to God, but that's backward. He doesn't wait for perfection, He perfects through surrender. Relying on His strength means praying even when tired, believing even when disappointed, and thanking Him before the breakthrough. Philippians 4:6-7 reminds us that when we bring everything to Him in prayer, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds. That's divine sustainment in motion.
Imagine carrying a heavy box alone until your arms shake. Then someone stronger walks in and lifts it effortlessly. That's what divine companionship feels like. God's strength doesn't erase the weight, it redistributes it. The burden stays real, but it no longer defines you. Each act of dependence becomes an act of transformation. And that transformation prepares the soul for what comes next. Peace through trust. True peace isn't found when problems disappear. It's found when fear does. Philippians 4:6-7 promises that when we bring our anxieties to God with faith, His peace guards our hearts like a divine shield. That peace doesn't ignore reality, it transforms it. It whispers, "You're not alone." Every time you surrender, you build a deeper bridge of trust between you and the Creator. And in that trust, even chaos starts to sound like calm. Isaiah 41:10 reminds us, "Do not fear, for I am with you." Those words aren't ancient comfort, they're present truth. God's presence doesn't promise a smooth path, but a steady heart. When the storms rise, faith over fear becomes more than a slogan, it becomes a lifestyle. Spiritual rest isn't about escaping challenges, it's about standing firm, knowing divine hands hold what your human strength cannot. So when the next wave of worry comes, and it will, remember where to go first. Don't run to pity or panic, run to prayer. Trust is the language of heaven, and every whispered, "God, I trust you," reshapes the atmosphere around you. That's divine transformation in its purest form. And once you taste that peace, you'll never settle for anything less than God's presence again. At the end of the day, every burden teaches one thing: only God sustains. You've tried to fix it, hide it, carry it, and still the weight remains. Maybe that's the point. Maybe God allows certain pressures not to break you, but to bend your heart toward Him. The moment you stop fighting and start trusting, peace walks in. That's not weakness, that's wisdom dressed in surrender. If you truly want transformation, stop giving your pain to temporary people and start giving it to an eternal God. He's not asking you to be strong, He's asking you to believe. Because peace isn't found in understanding everything. It's found in trusting the one who understands you completely. So tell me, what burden do you need to lay down today? What would happen if you stopped talking about it and started praying about it? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this message spoke to your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because your journey toward divine peace is just beginning.